how close we were to having a bad day is much looser than it needs to be. Just look at how frickin' cake that is. Welcome back to the Lost Cause Ranch. That is right, today we are playing with what is possibly the best Land Rover ever made. What are we doing today? We're going to attempt to solve, well, that don't exactly sound great. That issue, because that sounds frickin' terrible. And many of you may have heard about this little thing going on.
Do you want to be part of an adventure that is going to go down in the internet history books? This is the new Land Rover Defender Octa. This car could easily drive across the country, but this is not the point I'm trying to prove. This is, and I'm here to prove that a well-maintained Freelander can take me on one of my craziest adventures yet. I plan on taking this Freelander from the Red Ball Garage in New York City all the way to the Portofino Hotel in California. Yes, you guessed it, the Cannonball, but we're gonna do it a little bit different. We're doing it with Land Rovers, and it's called the Roverball.
But how does that exactly pertain to this particular vehicle? Well, when Justin from Lucky 8 was spitballing his little Roverball idea, I knew we had a matching version of the perfect Land Rover to trek across country. I mean, what better vehicle than something that works most of the time? And even better yet, the top comes off. Because we gotta look good when this thing is inevitably, I don't even know how to say that word, inevitably sitting on the side of the road doing Freelander things. But we are going to give this thing the best shot it's got at making, I don't even know how long it is, 3,000 mile trek, something like that. Too long for your typical Freelander. But today we're going to start on doing 20 years of neglected maintenance and bringing back what is, in my opinion, the best Land Rover ever made back to its former glory. We have quite the pile of parts to get this guy back into top shape. All right, so we're going to start really tearing into this guy so we can really see what kind of mess we're working with. We obviously have a noise inside, which I'm about 110% sure is one of the lifters. And every time I look at how much gunk is in here, I add a couple of percentage points to my sureness. Now, much like many of you out there, I haven't touched one of these engines. So you're going to get to follow along as I fumble through trying to figure out how to get each of these cylinder heads off so we can make the best Land Rover in the world. Once again, the best Land Rover in the world. After we get those guys off, we are also going to crack open the oil pan way underneath there so we can make sure we get a good full flush cleaning of the most wonderful V6 engine ever made. First thing we got to do is figure out how to get this front mess off so we can get the timing belt out of the way. And this is where the Freelander being front wheel drive based is kind of annoying because the engine is sitting in there the wrong way, leaving not a whole lot of room in the front of it. On a real truck, the front should be at the front. We could go ahead and look up the proper procedure in a service manual, but for the disassembly, we're just going to kind of wing it. When we go to put the timing belt back on, we'll make sure we do it correct. Too tight for that guy. We need a new lunch tray to keep the front drive separate. Those are too tight too. There's one I couldn't see from over there. Shoot, there's another one. Oh, geez, that one's tight. This has got to be like one of the single weirdest engine mounts I've ever seen. So we have your traditional mount down there with your bracket that goes to the front of the engine with a bolt to the top of that mount. Makes sense. But no, then we got a little donger coming off on this side with another bushing in it as like a wishbone type deal. But then we extend that out with another bracket that mounts to the strut tower. So we have connection, connection, connection. I guess I don't understand what we got going there. Wouldn't you just want that to go to there if you're trying to control it front to back? That thing is just frickin' goofy. And now we have another bracket on the front of the engine we got to rip off so we can get the serpentine belt off. I'd sure hate to throw a belt and have to change this on the side of the road because we are holding the engine up from the bottom so we could take that mount off. That just wouldn't be fun. And now with that out of the way, we're finally able to get the serpentine belt off. I think that could have been designed a different way. We'll put that on for safe keeping. Much better when you take everything out. That looks like it's been leaking. And I don't want to disconnect this guy right at this moment. So we're going to do this and just kind of zip tie it out of the way. I was kind of thinking this bracket would just unbolt from the top here, but it almost looks like it's part of the front cover. Oh my. So we got our upper covers off, and in typical Freelander fashion, we got problems. Two of the threaded inserts that were supposed to stay on these back covers came out with the front ones. So we got all the serpentine drive stuff out of the way. And now we should just be able to take out a few bolts back here and on the front here to get this entire conglomeration out of the way of the timing belt. So in what I think is a less than ideal design, we have to get the crank pulley off to get the rest of the timing cover off, which on something that has a timing belt, which is going to get serviced way more often than, say, a timing chain, I think it should be designed a little bit easier. And the only reason I'm really complaining right now is because it takes a special wrench to hold the crankshaft pulley in place down there. And being this is the first Freelander I have ever touched, I don't have that. But we do have a lock pin for the flex plate on the transmission side, so we'll try and get it off with that. And to get everything lined up in time to install that, I pulled our rear timing covers off because these also have a belt on the back side of the engine to tie the two camshafts together. And right here, we'll show you how close we were to having a bad day. It is much looser than it needs to be. So loose, in fact, when we were turning the engine over, that exhaust camshaft on the bottom there skipped a tooth on the belt. We kind of got lucky that the throttle body decided to take a shit. I would have kept driving it otherwise. So right there you can see we have our pin in place now. Now we can attempt to get the crankshaft bolt out. We have our torque multiplier installed onto the ratchet, which is also known as the Ratchet Breaker 3000. And to tell you the truth, I actually don't know which way we need to take the crank bolt out. I should check on that. Oh, there we go. So we were going the right way. There we go. See, that right there is where that crankshaft tool fits in. Big ol' hex nut looking thing. Around here, my hex nuts just aren't that big. About dang time. All right, so we're just gonna slip the cam gear off and do it the cheating way of getting the timing belt off. We gotta take some liberties when we're tearing it all the way apart. You can kind of see that we're at least not the first people in here. It's got a fairly new water pump. But now we're getting to the point where we can start disassembling. Look at those nice gloves. We can start disassembling the cylinder heads. These have like an integrated cam cover, top cover piece that splits on the head. So instead of individual cam caps, this is all one piece. So we'll get our other plastic timing covers off and then start ripping them apart. Then we're going to be able to get a good look at just how crusty this guy is. This thing is frickin' just cruddy all frickin' over. Gross. Now you're not supposed to use impacts to take apart stuff like this, but as you saw, I loosened and took all the tension off with the ratchet first, so this is just literally spinning them out. Got an interesting smell going on with all this. Like caked on, blown up engine kind of burnt oil smell. And now we can go after actually getting the cylinder head itself out of here. Should be interesting to see what we're dealing with once we pop that guy off. Just not quite strong enough to do those at that length. So we cheat. There we go. How's that side look? And right there is the inner workings of the old KV6. Just some sleeves, some pistons, quick cursory glance, and nothing looks too out of shape, which is not all that surprising because nothing was really going wrong on the bottom end. And we weren't eating coolant or anything. We just had a bunch of noise. And we'll set this to the side here. And you can see where the majority of that noise may have came from. And that is the massive amount of gunk we have going on in here. Just look at how freaking cake that is. Oil changes are cheap. Tearing an engine down to this point is much less cheap. People, just do your oil changes and do them with good oil, and you save yourselves a lot of headaches. Or should I say, you save Joe a lot of headaches, because usually when they get to this point, a lot of people just give up. All right, so what we're gonna do here now that both cylinder heads are no longer attached is see if we can tear this guy apart and undo what appears to be 20 years of neglected maintenance. When you properly maintain something, you don't have that much freaking buildup. I mean, that's unreal. See, when oil is that thick and solid, it doesn't quite flow where it needs to go, and on top of not flowing where it needs to go, when you put fresh, good oil in it, it still blocks that oil from going where it needs to go, and in our case, the hydraulic lifters. By the looks of that, there's probably some passages in here that aren't quite as open as they need to be, and that's probably why those lifters are rattling away. We do have a little bit of good news, though. For how coked up this cylinder head is, our cam bearing surface seems to be in decent shape. Not 100% perfect. You can see a few lines there, but none of them catch with the fingernail, so we'll be just fine with those. So we'll pull these out, set these aside. And looking at our journals, those are actually pretty nice. Although shockingly thin. That fricker is tiny. I don't know if I've ever seen a cam journal that thin before. Apparently Land Rover thinks it doesn't need a whole lot of support. Speaking of support, there's not a whole lot on them cylinder sleeves either, but we'll take a closer peek at that a little bit later. These guys right here are what this whole job started out going after. These are our hydraulic lifters and the root of that terrible noise. Just look at it freaking crumble in there. Unreal. So this little guy is where our racket is coming from. Or at least where I think our racket is coming from. This is the hydraulic lifter, and this makes up the space between the camshaft and the valve inside the cylinder head. And this is a hydraulic one, therefore it is pumped up with oil to make up that space. So instead of having to constantly adjust the valves like you would in something older, the hydraulic one makes up the space on its own via this little plunger fed by that oil. This style of lifter becomes a problem for those people who do not change their oil often enough, because that little oil port is tiny and there is only one way in, one way out, so it is easily gunked up. And if there is no oil flowing in there, this guy doesn't get pumped up and doesn't keep everything tight. Therefore, it just sits in there and rattles and makes a horrendous noise. But beyond that little port, I think we have another issue on this one. Being this cam cover is so freaking nasty, I think we have a problem with the oil feed as well. These are the passages where the oil distributes throughout the cylinder head, and it's never good when you're pulling gunk out like that. So we definitely need to get that cleaned up as well, because I don't think just throwing a new set of lifters in it would solve the problem. So what we're gonna do is run this guy up to the house and dunk it in the parts washer overnight. By the looks of it, may need a couple overnights. And this was cleaned to greaser before sticking the cylinder heads in there. These guys should be quite a bit cleaner now. We just have to brush them a little bit. So we made a quick run out to the car wash so we could wash some car parts. You may be able to see behind the laser right there, there is a water line. Well, the water's not currently hooked up in the shop at the ranch, and the pressure washer was out at the car wash, so it was much easier just to carry the cylinder heads there. But let's take a look at those cylinder heads. Not sure if you can remember, but a couple minutes ago you saw how frickin' dirty those guys were, and now you can see just how clean they came. That is right, we just undid about 20 years of horrible maintenance, and these puppies don't look brand new, but I'd say for what we started out with, they look pretty frickin' close. And those clogged up oil passages are in pretty good shape now. I don't foresee us having quite the same noises on the Freelander in the future, especially since we have a new set of lifters as well. These guys, coupled with all this stuff being cleaned up, is going to be the ticket to getting this thing across the country, or at least the ticket to giving us the best shot we have at getting across the country. But while we have the cylinder heads apart, we do have one thing that we're going to take care of, and that is going to be getting a new set of valve stem seals on the end of those guys, because with 120,000+ miles, it would be awfully irresponsible of us to not do that when we are this far into the engine. But to do that, we're going to have to run up to Ted's. He's got the valve spring compressor, and you will see that on the next video on our little Freelander, where we will get everything back together and hopefully running. But before you go, let's talk about one kind of concerning thing that I mentioned earlier in the video, and that is those cylinder sleeves. Now, while it's more concerning in my thought than in practice, apparently, that is quite possibly the thinnest top of a cylinder sleeve I have run across. That guy's like a frickin' pop can. And if we look down in there, we don't have a whole lot of support anywhere on those cylinder sleeves. Now, most of the engines that I've ran across that have like a floating cylinder sleeve like that have a much thicker top flange, because if you ask me, that doesn't leave us a whole lot of sealing surface for the head gasket itself, along with not a whole lot of side support keeping those cylinder liners in place. But I mean, there's not a whole lot we're going to do about that, but I can see how a minor overheating situation could easily lead to a catastrophic failure. Luckily though, we didn't overheat this guy, we just have it apart to fix the lifters. But we're definitely gonna make sure we never overheat it, because I'm afraid if we do, we'll probably be swapping a TD4 in. So on second thought, maybe we should just cook the thing.